I still remember the night Aunt Susan finally told her story. It was winter, the kind of winter that makes the windows shiver and the lamps burn lower than usual. We were drinking tea in her dim living room, watching the fireplace throw restless shadows across the walls. She looked older that evening, not in years, but in memory. Something heavy sat in her eyes, like a burden she had carried too long. She said, "I want to tell you something," she said softly, almost in a whisper. "My confession." She stared into the fire before she began. The school where it started. Years ago, Aunt Susan had been a new literature teacher at Riverbank High. She was only 23, full of hope, talent, and a gentle beauty she never even recognized in herself. The students adored her from day one. Her voice was calm, her smile warm, and the way she explained stories made even the laziest boys sit up straighter. But popularity came with its complications. High school boys, young, impulsive, often mistook admiration for affection. They flirted, joked, even wrote silly poems to impress her. But Susan kept her distance politely. She had boundaries, she was professional, and she had Daniel, her boyfriend at the time, a kind, hardworking man studying to become a police officer. Susan loved him deeply, and nothing could change that. Or so she thought. The mysterious boy, Jack. Jack entered her class quietly on the third week of the semester. He was unlike the others. He sat at the last desk, beside the window, never smiled, never caused trouble, never spoke unless called. But his eyes, those cold, watchful eyes, followed her everywhere she moved. At first, Aunt Susan didn't think much of it. Teachers often had timid students, shy students, but Jack wasn't shy. He was observant. Too observant. He handed in perfect assignments. He never missed class. He lingered near the classroom door, as if waiting for something, someone. One afternoon, as the last student left, Aunt Susan saw Jack still sitting there, staring at the chalkboard. "Jack, school's over. You can go home." He lifted his head slowly. "Home's overrated." His voice was flat, empty, like someone who practiced emotions but never truly felt them. She replied kindly, "Still, it's late. You should head out." He didn't move. Instead, he asked, "Does he treat you well?" Susan blinked. "Who?" But Jack only smirked, grabbed his backpack, and left. That night, she told Daniel, who simply laughed and said, "Teenagers. They think teachers live in fairy tales." But Susan knew Jack wasn't simply a teenager with a crush. There was something darker beneath his silence. Jealousy began. Over the next weeks, Jack changed. He stayed after class more often. He asked questions, not about literature, but about her hobbies, her routines, her weekends, her favorite places. And always, he asked indirectly about Daniel. "Does he make you happy? Are you sure he deserves you? You look tired after weekends. Does he stress you out?" Susan set boundaries, firm ones. "Jack, I am your teacher. You must keep conversations professional." Jack would nod, apologize, and behave perfectly the next day. But the look in his eyes remained the same, unblinking, possessive, calculating. Then the small incidents began. The first incident. One evening, Daniel came to pick her up from school. She saw Jack watching from the second-floor hallway window, his face motionless, his eyes sharp. Later that night, Daniel found a deep scratch along the side of his motorbike. A long, deliberate cut, like someone had taken a key and dragged it across the metal. "That's strange," Daniel muttered. "I parked in the school lot today." Susan's stomach tightened. She wanted to tell him her suspicion, but she wasn't sure. She didn't want Daniel confronting a student based on a feeling. But that scratch was only the beginning. The phone calls. Susan began receiving phone calls, late at night. No voice, just breathing. Slow, steady, listening. She'd hang up. It would ring again and again. One night she whispered, "Jack, is that you?" The breathing stopped instantly. Then the caller hung up. Her heart pounded for hours afterwards. The breakup rumors. Everything escalated when rumors spread across school. Miss Susan is breaking up with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend cheated on her. She cried after class because of him. None of it was true. Someone whispered these rumors so convincingly that even teachers quietly asked if she was okay. Daniel was furious. "Who's spreading this? Why would someone try to break us apart?" Susan stayed silent, but her fear grew. The rumors were detailed, too detailed, as if someone was watching her life very carefully, taking notes and twisting them into lies. The letter. The real horror began the day she found a letter on her desk. Not in an envelope, not signed. A single sheet of paper with neat handwriting. "Doesn't deserve you. He never will. You were meant for someone who understands you, someone who watches you, someone who sees everything." At the bottom was something that made her blood run cold. A drawing of her house. Her actual house, with her bedroom window circled. The night she finally saw him. One stormy evening, after Daniel dropped her home, Susan changed into her pajamas, took her book, and went to close the curtains. And that's when she froze. A figure stood across the street, perfectly still, under a street lamp. The rain blurred his silhouette, but she could see enough. A school uniform, a tilted head, hands in pockets. Jack, watching her window, watching her. He did not move. He did not hide, just stared, as if claiming something that wasn't his. Susan's breath trembled as she whispered to herself, this boy isn't just obsessed, he's dangerous." It was that moment she realized Jack wasn't going to stop, not until he had taken something from her. And he did. Something far worse than she could have imagined. Something she confessed only years later, sitting in that dim living room, staring into the fire.
Aunt Susan took a slow breath before continuing, as if her memories were made of broken glass. "You think the story was simply about obsession?" she whispered. "No. Obsession was only the beginning. The real nightmare began the night Jack decided I belonged to him." She leaned back, closing her eyes. And part 2 began. The police report that never should have existed. The day after Susan saw Jack standing under the street lamp, she went straight to school with the intention of speaking to the principal. But before she reached her classroom, a security officer stopped her. "Miss Susan," he said gently, "you might want to see this." He handed her a copy of a complaint report someone had anonymously submitted to the school administration. Accusation: Miss Susan is involved in an inappropriate relationship with a male student. Her blood froze. The letter didn't mention the student's name, but the description of the boy matched Jack perfectly. Susan's hands shook. Her reputation, her career, her entire life could collapse because of such a lie. But who would write? The officer looked at her knowingly. "Susan, someone wants to hurt you." And she realized Jack wasn't trying to flirt with her anymore. He was trying to claim her. The handwriting match. Susan denied the claim immediately. The principal believed her. She had always been professional. Teachers confirmed her impeccable behavior. But the principal said, "Susan, this letter It's written in the same handwriting as the essay Jack turned in last week. Every hair on her body stood on end. Jack had framed her as if preparing to trap her. Why? Because if she got suspended, if Daniel left her, if she had no one, she'd have no choice but to rely on Jack. That was his twisted logic. The principal arranged a parent meeting with Jack's family, but Jack never showed up. His parents didn't either. They travel often, Susan said. Yes, the principal replied, and it seems they leave Jack alone for days at a time. The puzzle pieces clicked together. Too much freedom, too little guidance, too much loneliness. A dangerous combination. The break-in attempt. That night, Susan wasn't able to sleep a second. She kept imagining Jack standing under the street lamp, rain pouring down his face like tears he didn't know how to shed. At 2:41 a.m., something jolted her awake. A clicking sound. Very faint, very slow. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from the window this time. It was coming from the back door. Susan slid out of bed, heart racing, and held her breath. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was trying the door handle. She quietly grabbed Daniel's spare flashlight and tiptoed toward the kitchen. The tapping stopped. Silence swallowed the house. Then, a whisper. Susan. She froze. Susan, open it. Jack's voice. Soft, begging, possessive. Her hand shook around the flashlight. Jack, go home, she said through the door. This is not appropriate. No, he whispered. You don't understand. You need me. I'm calling the police. No, you won't, Jack replied. I saw your phone. You left it in the living room. Her stomach dropped. He'd been inside her house before tonight. Susan, open the door, he said, before he ruins everything. She backed away slowly. Jack rattled the door violently, then suddenly, silence. A moment later, she heard running footsteps disappearing into the night. Daniel's warning. Susan called Daniel immediately. He arrived in minutes, furious and protective. Why didn't you tell me it was this serious? He demanded. I didn't want things to get worse, she whispered. He checked every lock, every window, every inch of the house. He's dangerous, Daniel said. Don't be alone until I figure this out. But the truth was, danger had already arrived. The crime begins. The next morning, Daniel walked her to school, but as they stepped into the parking lot, they saw something horrifying. Daniel's motorbike was dismantled. Not scratched this time, not damaged, dismantled, piece by piece. Screws neatly placed in rows on the pavement, seat removed, wires pulled out carefully. This wasn't vandalism. This was a message from someone patient, someone methodical, someone who wanted to show Daniel he could take apart anything he loved. A small note lay on the bike seat. Daniel opened it. The handwriting was perfect. One day, I'll take her apart just as carefully. Daniel's eyes went dark. He's threatening you, he growled. I'm reporting him today. But when police checked school records, Jack was absent. No one had seen him since the previous day. His parents weren't answering calls. Neighbors said the house was locked. Nobody had any idea where he was. Jack had vanished. Not run away. Vanished. And Susan felt a chilling certainty. He wasn't gone. He was hiding. Watching. waiting. The found footage. That evening, Daniel installed a small camera near Susan's back door. If he comes again, Daniel said, we'll have evidence. They went inside thinking the worst of the night was over. But when Daniel checked the camera's SD card, his face turned pale. "What is it?" Susan whispered. He turned the screen toward her, and her blood ran cold. Jack's face, right up to the lens, eyes wide, expression blank, breathing heavy. He whispered into the camera, "Confess, you love me." Then the footage cut to static. Susan covered her mouth, trembling. Daniel grabbed his jacket. "I'm going to find him." But Susan grabbed his hand. "No, don't go alone." He looked into her terrified eyes. "Then you're coming with me." Minutes later, they drove toward Jack's home. But when they arrived, every curtain was shut, the mailbox overflowing, the backyard gate open. The house looked abandoned. Daniel stepped inside first. Susan followed, heart pounding. The house smelled of dust, metal, and something else. Something like chemicals. Inside, the walls were covered with pictures. Pictures of Susan. Teaching, walking, reading, laughing with Daniel, entering her house, sleeping through her curtains. Jack had taken photos for months. Dozens, hundreds, every angle, every moment, a shrine of obsession. But the worst part? In the center of the room was a table, and on the table were Susan's missing hair tie, a piece of her torn notebook, and her house key, a key she didn't even realize she'd lost. Susan gasped. Jack had not just watched her, he'd prepared to own her. Daniel clenched his jaw. This ends tonight. But before he could take another step, a floorboard creaked behind them. Someone else was in the house. Someone hiding, someone breathing. Daniel whispered, "Susan, stay behind me." And from the darkness, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here, Jack." Still unseen, still concealed, still planning his next move.
Aunt Susan's voice trembled as she continued. The fire crackled, the shadows thickened, and her confession grew darker. The voice in the dark. "Susan, stay behind me," Daniel whispered. The abandoned house was silent except for their breathing. Dust floated in the air like pale ash, making the place feel less like a home and more like a memory that should have been erased long ago. Then Jack spoke again. Soft, calm, unsettling. "You weren't supposed to bring him," he said. His voice was close, too close. Daniel slowly pulled Susan behind his arm. He scanned the corners, each one swallowed in shadow. Jack continued. "It's rude to enter someone's private space without invitation, but you came anyway. That means you're not afraid. That's disappointing." A faint shiver crawled up Susan's spine. He was enjoying this. The discovery in the basement. Daniel motioned toward the open basement door. A smell drifted up, something metallic, something rotting, something wrong. "I'll go first," Daniel whispered. But Susan grabbed his arm, fear tearing at her voice. "Daniel, please, we should call for backup." "No, he's here. I'm ending this." He descended the stairs, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Susan reluctantly followed. What they found in that basement would haunt her forever.
Jack's hidden room. The basement was transformed into a twisted sanctuary. Chains, old wooden chairs, a mattress with straps, photographs pinned in rows, dozens, hundreds, all of Susan. In class, in the hallway, at the grocery store, sleeping behind curtains he had somehow photographed through. And then the folder. A black folder sitting neatly on a metal table. Daniel opened it. Inside were detailed plans. Maps of Susan's daily routes, her classroom blueprint, her house layout, alarm timings, a step-by-step kidnapping plan, and lists titled Phase 1, Separate Her from Him, and below that, Phase 2, Isolation. Susan's breath caught in her throat. Jack hadn't been improvising. He had been preparing for months. Then Daniel found something worse. The photos of Susan's house weren't the only ones. There were pictures of other women, 3 of them, and red circles drawn around their faces. Susan whispered, "Daniel, who are they?" Daniel's face darkened. "These are missing persons from last year." Susan staggered back. Jack wasn't just obsessed. He had done this before. Jack appeared. Suddenly, clap, clap, clap. Slow, mocking applause echoed from behind them. They spun around. Jack stood at the bottom of the stairs, half lit by the flashlight beam. His uniform was wrinkled, his hands were stained with something dark, and his smile wasn't a smile at all. "You finally found my collection," he said softly. "I've been waiting." Daniel stepped forward, voice firm. "Jack, step away, don't move." Jack tilted his head. "Or what? You'll arrest me? You don't have proof. Not yet." He looked at Susan. Only Susan. "You came to me," he whispered. "I knew you would." The trap. Jack slowly lifted his right hand, revealing something small and silver. A remote switch. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" Jack shrugged lightly. "Insurance." He pressed the button. A loud click sounded somewhere above them, followed by a heavier sound. Thud. Then another. Thud. Daniel's flashlight trembled as he pointed it upward. Susan gasped. Heavy steel bars slid down over the basement entrance. They were locked in. Jack exhaled slowly, almost peacefully. "This is better," he said. "Now we can talk without interruptions." The confession of Jack. Daniel stepped between Susan and Jack. "Stay away from her." Jack ignored him. He spoke directly to Susan, voice trembling with twisted devotion. "You think I'm the villain," he whispered, "but you don't know the truth." He stepped closer. "My father," he said softly, "was not kind. My mother left. I learned early that if I wanted something to stay, I had to make it stay. And I want you to stay." Susan's words came out choked. "Jack, listen to me. You need help. This isn't—" "Stop," he snapped. "I don't need help. I need you." Daniel's mistake. Daniel lunged toward Jack, but Jack was faster. He ducked, swinging the remote downward like a blade, slashing Daniel across the forearm with its sharp edge. Daniel stumbled, bleeding. "Jack!" Susan screamed. Jack turned to her, and suddenly his voice softened. I didn't want to hurt him. I only wanted to remove him." The calmness in his tone made it worse. He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicking. He was pleased. The saw marks. Daniel, still on the floor, grabbed the table to pull himself up, but his eyes suddenly widened. On the far wall, behind a curtain, he spotted deep scratch marks, long, jagged, desperate, like nails clawing for escape. Daniel pulled the curtain aside and found ropes, stained dark, handprints on the wall, and initials scratched in the paint. L.R., one of the missing girls. Daniel's voice shook. "Susan, he's killed before." Jack sighed like someone bored with repetition. "They didn't understand me. They screamed too much." He looked at Susan. "But you won't." Jack stepped forward slowly, lifting one hand toward her cheek, and the basement lights flickered violently. Then went out. Complete darkness. Susan screamed. Daniel yelled her name. Footsteps shuffled everywhere. Something crashed, someone gasped, then a voice, ragged, close to Susan's ear. "Don't worry, I will find you in the dark." The moment the basement lights went out, the world collapsed into pitch-black nothingness. Not dim, not shadowed, utterly, suffocatingly dark. Susan couldn't see her own hands, couldn't see Daniel, couldn't see Jack. But she could hear. Breathing, shuffling, a soft scrape of metal on concrete, and then a whisper right behind her ear. "You can't hide from me." Someone brushed her shoulder. Susan screamed, stumbling backward, hands groping for anything, anyone. Daniel shouted from somewhere in the dark, "Susan, stay still. Don't move." But she couldn't. Her fear was stronger than her reason. The first attack. A loud grunt echoed through the basement. Daniel. A body collided with something metal. Then a sound. A sickening crack. "Daniel!" Susan cried out. He didn't answer. Her heart stopped. She tried to run toward where she'd heard him, but the moment she took a step, a hand clamped around her ankle. Not tight, not violent. Slow. Possessive. Jack's voice rose from the ground. "I told you I would find you in the dark." Susan kicked wildly. Her heel connected with something soft, Jack's jaw. He groaned, grip loosening. Susan scrambled away. The hidden switch. Her fingers brushed something wooden, a workbench. Searching desperately, she felt along its surface. Rope, screwdrivers, tape, a scalpel. Her stomach twisted. Then her fingers found a small box attached under the table. A switch. "Please," she whispered. "Please be the light." She flipped it. Nothing. Her heart sank. But then, a faint click overhead, followed by a dim emergency bulb flickering on. The basement filled with a low red glow, barely enough to see shapes, but enough. Blood on the floor. Daniel was on the ground, one hand pressed to his head, blood seeping through his fingers. "Daniel!" Susan rushed to him. He groaned, I'm fine. Where is he?" A movement near the shadows answered. Jack stood up slowly from behind a stack of boxes, wiping blood from his mouth. The red light made his eyes look hollow, empty. "You shouldn't have hit me," he said quietly to Susan, "but I forgive you." He took a step forward. Daniel tried to stand up, but he could barely balance. Jack smirked.
You can't protect her anymore. Daniel reached toward the table for leverage and accidentally knocked over a heavy metal box. Photographs scattered everywhere. Dozens. Hundreds. But these were different. Not surveillance images, not stalking shots. These were crime scenes. Burn marks. Bruises. Rope cuts on wrists. Girls crying. Girls gagged. Girls tied to the very same chair in the basement. And in one photo, a girl unconscious on the floor. Her school ID lay next to her. Name, Emily Rowe. Status, missing. Susan covered her mouth, gagging. Daniel's breath caught. Oh, God. Jack crouched, calmly collecting his photos like spilled toys. He said softly. They were loud. They panicked. They didn't understand what love means. He lifted one photo where a girl stared into the camera, eye swollen from crying. But you, he whispered, looking at Susan, you're different. You're perfect. Susan's legs trembled. Jack stepped closer. Jack looked at Susan with the mixture of love and insanity. You want the truth? He asked. Fine. He spread the photos across the floor like a deck of cards. I followed them first, like I followed you. I waited outside their houses, like I waited outside yours. I got close to them, closer than anyone. Susan whispered, Why? Why them? Jack smiled. I was practicing. Her stomach dropped. For what? Jack's voice softened like a lover's. For you. Daniel's last stand. Daniel pushed himself up, swaying. Jack, this ends right now. Jack turned slowly toward him. Daniel, you've always been the obstacle. He stepped closer, pulling something out of his pocket, a thin, sharp blade. Susan screamed, No! Daniel tried to stand his ground, but Jack lunged. Daniel twisted aside, but the blade cut across his arm, deep and fast. He collapsed again. Blood spilled on the basement floor. Jack raised the blade. Susan screamed, Stop! And Jack froze. Not because of fear, because of her voice. The twist, Jack's other plan. Jack lowered the knife slowly. I wasn't going to kill him. You think I'd ruin your life like that? No, I have a better idea. He stepped backward, smiling. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came to take you home. He pointed to a large wooden crate in the corner. The lid was slightly open. Inside was a pair of manacles padded with cloth. Blankets, a pillow, a water bottle, books tied with a ribbon, and a note taped inside. For our first night together. Susan's heart collapsed inside her chest. Jack whispered, I prepared everything. I always prepare. The darkness returns. Suddenly, the red light flickered. Once. Twice. Jack tilted his head. Oh. He smiled. You flipped the emergency switch. That means the generator will overload soon. What does that mean? Susan gasped. Jack answered calmly. The basement will go dark again. Daniel grabbed Susan's hand tightly. Susan, when it goes dark, run. Jack leaned back against the wall. You can run, but I know every corner of this house. You'll never escape me. The light blinked violently. The hum of electricity crackled. And then, darkness. Total and absolute. And Susan heard one more whisper in the pitch black. You're finally mine.
The rain hammered violently on the roof of the abandoned school building as Aunt Susan, now older, her face pale and trembling, sat in front of the recorder. This was the moment she had avoided for decades. The moment she would finally confess the truth she buried so deep that even she had begun to doubt whether it was real. The red light blinked. She took a breath. Then she began. The night of the science fair. It was the night everything snapped. The entire school was buzzing with excitement. Projects lined the halls, students chatting, parents snapping pictures. Susan, only 23 at the time, felt proud of her students. But Jack was nowhere. He hadn't submitted a project. He hadn't shown up in class for days. Each absence only made other teachers shrug. But Susan knew Jack wasn't the type to disappear. Around 7:40 p.m., a janitor rushed toward her. "Ma'am, the lab door. Someone's inside and it's locked from the inside." Her heart dropped. She knew immediately. Jack. She hurried to the lab and pounded on the door. "Jack! Jack, open this right now!" A whisper answered, too soft to understand. When the school security finally broke the door open, they found something that froze everyone. The room was filled with pinned photographs on the walls. All of them were of Susan. Her classroom, her walks home, her sitting in the teacher's lounge, her holding hands with Aaron, her boyfriend. At the center of the room was Jack, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at a small recorder in his hand. On the desk beside him was Aaron's science fair badge and a hammer. When Jack saw her, he smiled. Soft, unhinged, oddly peaceful. "He shouldn't have touched you, Miss Susan. I fixed it." Susan screamed for security to restrain him, but what happened next was far worse. Aaron's disappearance. After that night, Aaron never came home. Police questioned everyone, and Jack insisted Aaron had left town voluntarily, but the smile he gave Susan while saying it haunted her. They searched everywhere: parks, rooftops, woods, rivers. Nothing. With no body, no evidence, and Jack being a minor, police couldn't hold him. He walked free. The school expelled him, but the law couldn't touch him. Susan quit soon after, her mental state shaken, guilt eating her alive. But the nightmare was far from over. The first letter. It arrived 3 years later. No return address, no greeting, just 8 handwritten words. "You taught me well. I'm still watching you." Susan moved cities, changed her number, married a different man, hoping to rebuild a normal life. But the letters kept coming. Always 8 words, always watching. And then one day, they stopped. For 20 years, nothing. She started to believe Jack was gone, or dead. Until 3 nights ago. The return of Jack. She was locking her small stationery shop when she smelled it. Matches. Burning paper. Fear spiked through her. Her entire front door was filled with photographs again, fresh ones, taken recently, and pinned in the center, a small cassette tape. She froze. Her hands shook as she placed it in an old tape player, and Jack's voice, older, deeper, colder, filled the room. "It's been 20 years, Miss Susan. I learned many skills. People disappear more easily now." He chuckled softly. "I have something of yours, something you lost long ago." She felt her chest tighten. What could he mean? Then the tape continued. "Near the old lab room, under the floorboards, you'll find what I left for you." Click. Tape ended. Susan grabbed her coat and rushed into the storm. The lab. The old school building was decaying, Windows smashed, roof leaking, mold covering walls, yet everything felt exactly as she remembered. The lab room door was still scarred where it had been forced open years ago. Her breathing turned shallow as she entered. The room was dark, quiet, and smelled of old dust. She lifted the loose floorboard. A small metal box sat beneath it. Hands shaking uncontrollably, she opened it. Inside was a deteriorated science fair badge. Erin's badge. Her pulse spiked. She nearly collapsed. But there was something else beneath it. A folded note with only 3 words. He's still here. The door suddenly slammed shut behind her. Darkness swallowed the room. A voice whispered near her ear. Older, rougher, yet unmistakably familiar. "I waited for you, Miss Susan." She screamed. The recorder in her hand tumbled to the floor. The audio captured everything. Footsteps, a struggle, her panicked breathing, a low, calm voice whispering, "You shouldn't have left me alone." Then, silence. The final confession. The next morning, police found only the recorder. No body, no signs of a struggle, just the red light blinking, the recording still running. And on the chalkboard behind the teacher's desk, written in dust, "Class dismissed." To this day, no one knows what happened to Aunt Susan. No fingerprints, no witness, no trace. Some say Jack finally took her. Some say she ran. But the recorder, the very last sound on it, a faint whisper, barely audible, but chilling to the bone. Teacher and student, always.
After the final bell. 2 months after Aunt Susan vanished, the school board finally permitted a formal search of the old building. The structure was scheduled for demolition, and investigators wanted to ensure no evidence or bodies remained inside. Officer Hale, a seasoned detective known for never losing his nerve, was leading the final sweep. Yet even he felt uneasy walking the same halls described in Susan's recorder. When he reached the lab room, he stopped. The door, which had been broken for years, was now carefully repaired, polished, repainted. The wood looked new. No one on the crew admitted touching it. Officer Hale pushed it open slowly. The room looked different. The wall that once displayed Jack's photographs was scrubbed clean. The dust was swept away. The floorboards nailed shut. But the most disturbing sight stood at the center. A new student desk, placed neatly with a notebook on top. Hale opened the notebook. Inside, written in flawless handwriting, Lesson 1. Some disappearances are not crimes. They're commitments. Below it, a second line, written far darker, gouged into the paper. She learned her place. Hale swallowed hard. As he closed the notebook, it fell open again, this time to the last page. A photograph slipped out. A recent photograph. Aunt Susan, alive, eyes wide, terrified, and standing behind her, just a blurred shadow. But Hale could tell it was him. Jack. The back of the photo had something scrawled in the same neat handwriting. Class resumes soon. Hale turned toward the door, but it slowly closed on its own. The lights flickered, and from the back corner of the room a faint whisper echoed, "Teacher and student, always." The tape recorder in Hale's pocket began recording on its own, and the epilogue ends with darkness swallowing the room.